William Gumede is Associate Professor at the Wits School of Governance and the Executive Chair of the Democracy Works Foundation and joins me now. William, good evening to you and welcome. I want to start with just those last two sentiments. There is basically a culture of negligence and these are consistent delinquents. This should be unacceptable in a South Africa where we are penny pinching and this is taxpayers' money.
Thank you for having me here. I'm so grateful. It is really just accountability. If you think about it, 5 years, five consecutive years, the same people are still there. Nobody's been held accountable. No personal liability. Nobody's been fired. No heads have been rolled. And I think that really is astonishing. With all of the debates that we have as a country, we're sitting in a country right now with the biggest financial crisis in generations, certainly since the Second World War. A lot of, ordinary families and individuals are really suffering from poverty, unemployment, and also because of lack of service delivery. And here we've got such an absolute waste of public resources.
She spoke about culture, but there's also a culture of impunity. It's bad enough in year one, one could say, the system's failure, or, make up some ridiculous excuse. But there are governance processes that are in place that can be utilized to keep you on the straight and narrow. There are oversight mechanisms. It's not like these accounting officers are incapacitated to do their job. Speak to us about this culture then of consistently dropping the ball.
Yes, we've got, so it's a systemic culture in the public service, clearly, and also state-owned entities of lack of accountability and nobody is being held accountable. Just the fact that for these 5 years, the same cabinet ministers are still there. None of them have been fired. The Director Generals and senior management is there. And no one has taken personal liability for it. There is a new law that's supposedly to hold individuals personally accountable, but that clearly hasn't been enforced. So we really have to go there. The other part of it is also, it is because the public service and SOEs are so politicized, political deployees, it's very difficult to hold them accountable because, if anyone wants to hold them accountable, they phone up the party leadership, they get protected.
So here's the thing, when you listen to the breakdown of how this money, and it's an eye-washing sum of money, this is, hundreds of millions of rands over a consistent period, things like cancelled travel plans, buildings that are disused, paying for services that never get delivered. It galls to hear that kind of mismanagement, because that's what it is, flagrant mismanagement and a lack of really any kind of governance or accounting ethics.
No, absolutely. I'll just give you a feel, just sort of holistically, for viewers. Let's just say, our annual budget of the whole country is something, between 1.5 and say 1.8 trillion. Of that money, around 30 to 40% is actually wasted in this way. Totally wasted. We know, and including corruption also. So it means that, out of that money, we're talking here about 600 billion, gone because of corruption, mismanagement, and waste, and no accountability. So that money is lost for delivery. That money is lost, for schools, or for grants, or for hospitals. It's lost, gone. Yeah. And nobody's been held accountable.
I'm just thinking as you're talking about our annual event called the State of the Nation, and where, or even the budget address, for example, where we basically read the Riot Act on what must happen and austerity and so on. It's almost as if you need a similar moment of calling to account that is a somber moment that is all about making people do their jobs and do it properly.
No, we have, and I think it's also, citizens and civil society and community groups are not doing enough to hold individuals in government accountable. And I think that is very important. And then, of course, the biggest accountability tool really is elections and voting. And we see the ways, but it's not linked. People do not understand that, the wastage of these resources leads to them not getting the services on the one hand, and they can't link it to the people that they elect as actually responsible for that. And of course, this is also the fault of opposition parties, the fault of civil society. We have to do more to explain to ordinary citizens that, if this kind of money is lost, it is the people voted in, and don't go and vote for them again.
Yeah, if I had, this this point of view is as threadbare as a Persian rug at the foot at the entrance of the souk or the market, because people consistently still may not see that connection and vote in that way. But what's concerning is you have three key institutions. We talk about the top two institutions, Defence and Treasury, who have been repeat offenders. And we really expect, especially with Treasury, to be completely 100% above reproach, because they're in charge of an important aspect of our lives.
Because Treasury is essentially, the regulator of our finances. Now, for it to make, to mismanage, it's not a good look, because, it's supposed to police the management of money of the other department, of the state-owned entities. Now, if it also, mismanage our money, really then, you see how deep the crisis is really of mismanagement and lack of accountability. I mean, defense, the defense complains every year of not getting, a good enough budget. But the extraordinary waste of defense. Remember during the COVID period, what they did, they went to buy 300 million of a useless drug, COVID-19 supposedly.
It was mothballed.
Absolutely. Without any accountability. I wonder, has anyone been held accountable? Has anyone been prosecuted? Has anyone been fired? No one has. That hasn't happened.
So who, ultimately, who should take responsibility? We heard from the AG's office; they're holding accounting officers almost personally liable. It's one of the, one of the action points. But how do we begin to get accountability? On the one hand, we can say, they need system support. You need support at different levels to help with the management and the accounting process. But when you look at some of these crimes of omission and commission around just leaving things to go derelict, what is, in your mind, one of the most effective ways besides voting? Yeah.
It's not about systems anymore. It is just now that the president, as the head of the government, needs to fire people. So, yes, the department has been pointed out 5 years in a running. So, the president obviously gets this report. What he should do now, he should actually fire all of these departments implicated, and the Director Generals also. Now, that's accountability. If he doesn't do that, we will see that next year and the year thereafter, while the ANC is still in government. So, the buck stops with the president. He really has to stand up and say, I'm the CEO of this government. I'm in charge. You are not delivering like for 5 years. Look at the billions that you wasted. I'm dealing with you. You are fired.
We didn't even get to the 9% of, SOEs that have accounted and the rest haven't, if my reading of that was correct. That's for a conversation in future. But thank you so much, William, for just sharing your perspective on how and some of the ways we can effectively deal with non-delivery and non-accountability in this particular way. I really appreciate your time this evening.